Hello, and welcome to Feel Good Friday on Church at Home with Rachel. Today is the 15th of September, and it is a glorious day. In Canada, this day, the third Friday of the month, is always, since 2019, has been named by our government as Military Family Appreciation Day. And it's an opportunity when, as Canadians, we can give thanks for those members of families whose husbands or wives, whose mums or dads or children serve in the Canadian Armed Forces. And so we take time, it's not a holiday or anything, it's a day of appreciation. Our schools and other places take time to give thanks for the families. And in Canada, we have a phrase referred to as the strength behind the uniform. It is We do not have the most powerful military in the world. We don't have the biggest presence in other places around the world. But Canada has had and continues to have a pretty good reputation for peacekeeping. And in some cases, we might refer to some of it as peacemaking. But the availability of Canadian Armed Forces members, men and women, in the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, to go where they are called around the world, often right here at home on operations that take care of when we've had ice storms or flooding or forest fires. We've had a lot of those. When members of our military leave home, leave their bases to go in Canada to serve, or around the world to give because they feel called to give, they have trained, but recognition that they are only going to be able to serve as well as the support that they have. And for many, many years, especially I think years prior to the Middle East, the Gulf Wars, I think there was an assumption that the people at home would just buck up. They would hang on and they would pray and knit socks and roll bandages and ration gas and sugar and all those things that we heard talked about in the world wars about how can we support our troops, how can we support that we can buy war bonds and things like that. But it was more of a lip service, I think, to the real sacrifices and the real strength it took for those families back home. There has been an increasing presence of recognition of the incredible power and importance that military families have in support of the missions of Canadian troops. And I would hazard a guess that in the United States, that's seen as well. So in here in Canada, we refer to it as the families and the family members as the strength behind the uniform. There are men and women who are the people who stay home while their partners go off to serve, whether it's on course, they're going on training, or they're going off to serve on operations, deployments, etc., who are the ones who are left with cutting the grass and fixing the car and making sure the kids get to school and the bills are paid and all of the worrying of everything, of becoming a single parent even when you're not, or those who don't have children, of becoming a single person again even when you're not. And that can be very, very, very difficult to know that your spouse is gone someplace, your partner has gone off to be someplace where they need to be, and you support them. But at the same time, you are left behind to hold everything together, knowing that although their lives are changing because of what they're obviously doing, where they are, what they're participating in, your life is changing too, but it's a little bit more invisible. And quite often, that strength behind the uniform is indeed invisible. We just don't see it. Because my husband is in the military, live in military communities, and I have for 18 years almost. And when you're in that community, it becomes rather easy to forget that you're a part of a special community because you just do what you got to do. When we lived on the base in Borden, it was a very different thing because we were living within the PMQ patch. We were living in the quarters where everybody who lived there was part of the community. And we had our own way of living and being and thinking and speaking. We had our own resources. When we moved off base and started moving in the communities where the bases were, I realized there was an incredible disconnect between the people who lived around me and the people that I considered to be sort of family because we were in the strength behind the uniform thing together. When you live in a community that has a base or a wing or a dockyard in the Canadian Armed Forces, that community becomes dependent upon that military base just as surely as the military base is dependent upon the community for schools and shopping. But also those communities are dependent upon the base, because if those bases shut down, what would happen to the community? We have some small towns in Canada that are host to some significant bases. They may not have a lot of people on them, but if those bases were just close and move away, there'd be hundreds, if not thousands, of people no longer shopping in the stores, buying their gas, visiting the small town or the local businesses. Children wouldn't be in school. There wouldn't be the resources of the spouses who bring their gifts as teachers and nurses and business owners and all of those things. The relationship between our our military communities and the civilian communities we have needs to be celebrated and understood. And on this military family appreciation day in Canada, I would like to say thank you to all of those groups of people who support our families. For especially in particular, I think it's in here in Wainwright and my work with the Military Family Resource Center, I'd like to shout out to all the teachers and the school boards and all of the daycare centers and all of the places that have like minor hockey or soccer or baseball and football who work with children who are members of military families, because these are kids who quite often drop in at the beginning of the year and may only be in your school for a year or two or in your program for a year or two, and then they move again. But when they are accepted and you support them and you recognize the challenges they have, like that little hockey player who's 10 years old and trying so hard, but when it comes to that big playoff game, his dad's not in the stands because his dad is in Kuwait, or his dad is in that baseball game his dad can't make it or his mom can't make it to because mom's off fighting forest fires in BC. The support that you give to that child, helping them to feel that they are not alone, because they are this little 10-year-old is indeed strength behind the uniform. When you support them and encourage them, when you take time to understand as a teacher or as a volunteer in the school or as a fellow student what it is they're going through, that they don't have necessarily the stability or the resources of grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles right around them because they move so many places or across the country. When you take the time to understand them and support them, you give them the opportunity to feel that they have a community where they are rooted, even if it's just for a little while. It is really, really important that we acknowledge and celebrate the families that support our military members, but in particular the children who don't choose this life. There's a joke that, the sergeant major used to say, if we wanted you married, we would have assigned you a wife. Well, the spouses, whether we realize it or not, make a decision about whether or not we're going to enter into this wild ride called being a military spouse. But our children don't make that decision. It's not their choice. And so we need to pay attention to them and support them and encourage them and give them all the best resources we can. Because while they live an incredibly interesting life, they also have challenges that the average kid doesn't. So in this Canadian Military Family Appreciation Day, and for all of you who are elsewhere in the world and recognize that you too have militaries with families behind them, take some time to pray for them. Reach out if you know any of them and say thank you. How can I support you? Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service can be said to the spouse who stays home and the child who's home as well. Their service may not be at war, but their service is just as important. So to all my brothers and sisters, my siblings in the Canadian military families, cheers. And thank you, and God bless you for being the strength behind the uniform. Have a great day, everybody. God bless, and I will see you again on Monday.